We're going to dig into the financial wellness journey, again, from a FinTech perspective. And we've got a great panel kind of covering the gamut once again. And again, thanks for that initial conversation. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that's so important to do, bring together strategics like Vanguard, Amex, SEI. We're going to continue that dialogue, add a couple of smaller focus firms, but I want to introduce our moderator and thank Shauna Mace. Shauna is the Managing Director of the Practice Management Solutions for Independent Advisor Solutions at SEI. And welcome. I know you're going to introduce the rest of our panel.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and you guys set us up perfectly, so I appreciate that. I think we're all excited for this conversation. We're going to explore what is the impact and responsibility we have in the financial wellness journey, and I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Nathan.
Sure. Make sure this is on. There we go. Yeah, great to meet everybody. Great to be here. I'm Nathan Zom. I head our target retirement and goal-based investing research team within Vanguard. So this team is housed within our investment strategy group. We're in charge of all of the underlying methodology and research that's actually going to drive, whether it's the asset allocation advice or the other components of financial planning elements that somebody would actually experience up on our website. And yeah, looking forward to everybody's questions.
Thank you. So, hello, my name is Adam Holt. I tend to joke that I'm a recovering certified financial planner. Been in this space for 25 years. Solved the problem in my local firm with a concept called Asset Map. Asset Map became a technology company. It's won a bunch of things.
Very good.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, whether any financial advisor wants to get into the tech world, it's a complete change. But I was lucky enough I gave up my licenses about 4 or 5 years ago, and now I've grown Asset Map. It's become a thing. It's a visualization tool that helps advisors see everything going on in people's lives, and we're actually moving to a direct-to-consumer experience to help connect both the advisor and the CPA community and the legal community. So that's why it relates to the prior conversation. Thanks for having me.
I'm Jason Ray. I founded Zenith Wealth Partners just under 3 years ago. We're a registered investment advisor here in Pennsylvania. We deliver financial planning and investment management services, but also scoop together a lot of different technology tools to give our clients a comprehensive experience. So I appreciate the panel before, and it's great to follow up.
Great. So I'm going to start with asking all three of you to define what financial wellness means to you. We talked about the regulation, the data, the responsibility. I think we're going to focus more on the consumer or the investor, but I'm interested in just level setting. We know what financial world means. We know what wellness means, but what does that mean today, financial wellness?
Just looking at you. All right.
Looking at you.
I mean, I think, look, there's two components I think that are important about wellness. One is confidence, so somebody's confidence in their financial position and the plan if they have one. The second piece is transparency, right? Them understanding what all is going in to impact their financial life, and being able to determine what the drivers of it are and like how to find it and access it and see it and visualize it.
So I've been doing a lot of conversations about financial wellness recently because it is obscure, and I don't think a lot of us really have put a pin on it, let alone the consumer base out there, right? Most people I think have been focused on how do I get wealthy, not necessarily how do I get wealth healthy, right? With that great fun mashup that a lot of people are using in the commercial space now. So I tend to think of it along actually a grid. There's the present and the future, and there's dealing with my need for certainty and security, and also my need to make sure that I have enough capital in the future. And so I think it's very much a combination of getting financially fit, which means making good decisions, which means behavior and skill set and literacy. So I think all of those words really roll up to this idea of being financially well.
Yeah, I think the behavioral element is really a key part of it. Wellness, particularly from a financial standpoint, there's obviously your balance sheet, a household balance sheet. Being financially well, all of us could do the numbers on that. That doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to feel financially well, and so that behavioral component is enormous. We can actually see that even in interactions that somebody might have with content. You might be able to tell them, oh, you're on track for retirement. They may not actually feel well about that though. So a lot of it is even in how messages are articulated, making sure that it resonates and how we were talking about somebody's financial plan. Then there's the actual mechanics of it, of course. It's almost impossible for somebody to save for the future without actually having their present day finances. You can't live hand to mouth and probably feel particularly financially well And so when we look at people's financial wellness journey, it's gonna have to start probably with the nearer term pieces, almost as you're building a pyramid, set that foundation, and then building up towards those longer term pieces to get towards a pinnacle almost of financial wellness.
I'm interested to pull that thread. So how are we doing today as an industry, technology industry, providing solutions and advisors? How are we doing today, and what do we need in order to build that pyramid and get to that higher level?
I think we can see some of it. An industry I work really closely with is the 401k plan sponsor space, and for them, financial wellness has multiple impacts. One, if people were previously aware that, if my employees aren't healthy physically, they're not going to be able to produce as much widgets for me. If they're not financially healthy, they're also not going to be able to produce as many widgets for you. They're going to be stressed, they're going to be distracted, and so that sense of, hey, this is actually a mutually beneficial thing is quite effective. Then what does that mean? I think the immediate reaction was like, we'll help them save more for their 401k and save more for retirement, which is lovely. But that may not actually be a lot of households' most pressing financial need. And so that's where I think when we are seeing the actions, whether it's in terms of participant engagement, the nudges somebody might experience in a web interface, maybe talking about retirement is completely inappropriate. Maybe that's actually gonna just add more stress to all of the things that they're already worried about. And rather surfacing, you've got credit card debt, student loan debt, you may not have enough emergency savings. Surfacing those things first, not even all at the same time, one thing at a time. And I think that is where technology can really come in and creating very focused messages, ones that seem that are much more relevant or likely to be relevant, and add towards progress rather than adding towards stress. Because I think a lot of times we can stress people out because we can see all of it. They may only want to talk about one thing at a time.
So I'll just offer that, financial wellness is, I want to say that it's been esoteric in a general sense. Right? I don't know that all of us would answer the same way what wellness means. Like, why does it even matter? And without us understanding societally why it matters, I don't know that it's ever going to get the attention. So I'm glad it's a topic. The interesting thing about it is most of my research reads as that over 50% of the United States is living paycheck to paycheck. They're not talking or thinking about retirement. They're not worried about whether they can protect their families with insurances. We're like literally not even having the same conversation. The financial services industry has been talking to the high net worth individuals who have excess and surplus to work with, and that's where we spend much of our time and investments, right? Whether we're an asset manager or not. I've been in that business for many years. I mean, I'm gonna talk about estate planning and trusts and grats and all that to the average person, no. And so the point of me saying that is that the key to all of this is, as a society, we have to decide that we're better off as a society if we drive financial wellness for the mass population. And that's always going to start with literacy. Who's responsible for that literacy? You could argue society, not going to happen. It's going to wind up being the employer's role. And so the employer role is clearly providing the core of people's finances through their income sources, through their benefits, through their retirement, is going to have to work on education. So I think that's where the solution is going to be.
And I think that, I don't know if financial wellness can happen in isolation. I think that's why the advice industry exists, and I may be biased, and maybe that's why I started my company, but I agree with Adam that, the advice industry is catered to folks that probably already feel some element of financial wellness, right? And that's where maybe FinTech can help, and technology plays a role in helping to deliver that emotion and that feeling of confidence and wellness to folks that may not have access to high quality financial advice. To the point about how we're doing, I think as we've heard on the panel before, there's different technology solutions that deliver those confidence feelings or other emotions that drive wellness. I think it's up to the advice industry to figure out how to best leverage those tools to deliver that to their clients, or if it's an employer to deliver it to their employees, or if it's a school to deliver it to their students, right?
Can I ask a question just to what Adam said, because I like how you kind of put it, because the most difficult thing for me as a planner is that whoever's building the technology never knows what we want, right? Like, the best financial planning softwares are the ones made by CFPs, right? We have holistic planning coming out right now. We're all gobsmacked over it, right? Because it was built by a CFP, right? I signed up for that immediately because they know exactly what I want. And the problem I think we're seeing, because I was applying to some startups, like FinTech startups for a while, they have no idea my language, right? We can't talk to each other. And so if we can't talk to each other, why am I gonna use your product? So I'm curious, as in your position, you're a CFP, do you see that gap closing? Because otherwise we're all gonna be like this for a really long time.
Thanks for the question, and yeah, I'm also passionate about it, but the reality is that most of the tools that have been created are not created by the actual users. They're created by a business unit that says, a perfect example of that is, if you've been in the space of pretty much anything, usually an institution you work for says, we need a CRM, let's get a CRM. Why do they want a CRM? They want a CRM because we want metrics and we want it to. The person in the field is like, I just want to sell more, I want to meet more clients, I don't want to do this. So we don't see high adoption for tools that have been distributed to most of the financial services. Visually, you know, it was intentionally understood why, but because it wasn't designed by the consumer. And I think there's a huge move in the financial services industry from people like myself and smarter people than me that are creating tools. And I think that's the wonderful thing that I think Russ mentioned before, is that the barrier to entry for creating the real, we'll call it the real need to solve a problem that I have, is actually getting solved today because the barrier to entry is much lower. I don't know if that addresses your question, but I think it is definitely changing.
Yeah, no, all I wanna know is that it's changing.
It's changing.
That's all I
It's
wanna
changing.
know.
It's getting really interesting because the M&A activity that also Russ mentioned is definitely has the potential of altering that process, right? And like washing out some of the innovation. So I think some of us that are in the field are really paying attention to that.
So if we keep going down, like where are we going? How do we continue to make improvement? That's what we're all here for, right? We all want to succeed in whatever venture we're focused on or whatever space we're focused on. So co-creation, I'm hearing, is important and required. We need to make sure we get voice of end user and advisor, if it's the advisor. What else is required for us to continue to make progress in our ability to democratize or provide access to wellness more generally?
Well, for one, I mean, I think the demographics of the advice industry need to change. Like, I think, you know, we need younger folks coming into the industry trying to provide advice. I think, you know, not to have any ageism, but, you know, I think younger people may be more in tune with issues that other young people are facing and willing to solve problems and create solutions to do that. You know, if you play golf and you're trying to learn how to hit a fade, like, you're not gonna take a lesson from somebody who doesn't play golf. So, like, it's important to co-create and like work with other people that are trying to solve similar problems, even if they may not be in the same industry.
There's what, $68 trillion of money in motion right now. There is a wave. I mean, Gen X, the oldest Gen X are in their mid-50s. So millennials, the oldest millennials are 40. So yeah, there's a whole new consumer coming that is expecting something different from advisors and advice and just our industry.
Hey, you wanna go, please?
And I think, you know, expanding on that, the generational piece, and actually from the last panel, where they talked about the human element meeting the technology element, and Jason, to your point on the younger advisors needing to meet the younger accumulators, the needs are so different. I think the financial advice industry, wealth management, financial services in general, we're pretty good at servicing people who already have money. We know what to do with that. We know how to put together a proper portfolio. We know how to manage taxes. We know how to estate plan. For the half of the population who isn't there yet, who isn't in I'm building a capital base or growing my capital base that already exists, that's where a lot of the attention needs to go to. One, the hope is that you can convert those people from getting through those initial steps of financial wellness, paying down debt, get it through the student loan part of things, build an emergency savings. And then you can really start building capital. Having technology tools that are able to do that is a really key step for the industry as a whole, partly because, and the reality of it is, it's very hard to have a relationship with somebody without any money in financial services. How do you collect a fee from them? Do you charge $10 for helping them create a budget? You could, it's a possible business model. It's probably pretty hard to scale that. But hopefully some of the tools that we are seeing come out from a financial wellness standpoint that are hyper-focused on things like debt and emergency savings and shock planning, can then convert those people into the capital accumulators that we're already very adept at serving. But it's a slow transition, honestly. There's more than just our own financial services industry that's going to have to be a part of that. That's definitely getting access to those people and then being able to communicate with them on the things they actually need. That's a really important element.
So I think of two things if you want to drive wellness in the conversation. The first thing is we all know financial services is intimidating, especially as we already said, if you don't have education, knowledge, experience, come from money, all these other things. You can go on Google, right? You can ask a bunch of questions, but that doesn't give you necessarily certainty to take action. There's two things we need to do. Number one, there has to be a consumer experience that is owned by the consumer. Okay, the interesting thing about financial services organizations that intended to solve this problem with technology is that the advisor or the institution owns the data, owns the experience. The consumer's experience is tied to their relationship with that financial services company. If they want to leave or introduce other parties or collaborate, things we're saying that are necessary for innovation, they can't do it. Why? Because it's captive, it's a sticky process for the financial institution. Say, listen, you want to get your data, you got to go through us. So I think that's a real fail, and the reason it is because financial lives are 20, 30, 40 years. My relationship with my financial advisor is on average, 7 years. Do you see the disconnect there? And a lot of advisors don't have succession plans. So the challenge there is that we need to get the ownership of the experience and the data to the consumer first. That's a challenge typically for most financial advisors because we need insight, we need access to, we're usually responsible for it. But that's still only 30% of the addressable marketplace. 70% of the marketplace is do it yourself or partially do it for me and I'll do some of it myself, right? Some of you have financial advisors, maybe more than one. Maybe they talk to each other, probably don't, and an insurance advisor and a CPA, they probably don't all talk to each other. Why is that? The challenge with that, what we need to do is we need to democratize the data ownership and the experience so it's at the consumer level, okay? The second thing that I think that's, I don't know, can I even throw on more stuff on top of that? The second thing I think that's really incumbent upon this is we need to be able to give feedback immediately to the client. So where the prior panel talked about NLP and of course algorithmic as well as AI, is we need to get health feedback. So just like the Fitbit was commented, one of the things that we're working on is, can I give you a map of your entire financial life and also give you feedback as to health? Red light, green light, yellow light. No bigger than that. Probably should talk to somebody, probably should address this. These are next best actions. And if we start there, people will start to get awareness of their financial health as opposed to obscurity. I didn't know it was a problem, let me go watch Netflix. If you know there's a problem, you might be inclined, especially if you and your partner, if you have one, you're gonna start talking about it and address it. That's the key, is to get people aware of the problem in the first place and to give them in a position to act.
How should we, where are there opportunities with technology specifically around taking action, nudging? Like, I know it's hard.
Accountability is hard.
It's hard, accountability is hard. It's, a lot of times we don't do what we know we should do. So where are these opportunities that you're seeing? Is it AI, is it data? How do we, as humans, make sure we're part of that process development?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to maybe piggyback on a little bit of what Adam said, maybe push back a little bit. I think the industry really depends on clients being ambitious, right? And it's very easy for somebody who's wealthy to think that people who aren't want to become wealthy. Maybe they don't, right? So like having an ambitious client matters if you're gonna put data in the hands of the client. But if they're not ambitious, they don't really mind and they just want you to do it, that may not be the right solution, right? And I think, to the point about engagements and pushing people to do things that are on their financial plan or if they need to do from our perspective that makes sense, I think the human engagement is really critical, right? I think that's why advisors exist, right? People need a nudge sometimes from a human to say, hey, do this or do that or think about this. It's not always like developing the plan, but sometimes it's just the advice, right? Two different things. Executing a financial plan and just giving somebody advice and looking somebody in the eye are two totally different things, and the latter engagement may be more impactful than a technology solution. But again, I'm biased, right? I'm in the industry.
Actually, it's funny because I agree with you. We could start it would be fun actually if we started going at it. I think they would enjoy that, get them excited. First of all, I do actually agree with what you said. And I think the key to this is that when we need professional advice, whether we pay for it as a fee or they're an asset management or however that's getting paid, what I think about long-term data ownership is that there's no question you still need to have a professional advisor driving when I say I don't want to drive. But when I want to drive, like, okay, honey, can I drive a little bit? And that way, take this over, we're in a real crazy area, I don't want to drive here. Right, so I think what consumers are going to evolve into is they're going to select a quarterback. They're going to select somebody who's going to run point when they need that time in their life, maybe end of life, maybe coming to retirement, education. And I think we need to create a collaborative environment where we can actually access multiple professionals in this space all over the world, not just in Philly, to help us. And that's where I think we need to get to, otherwise we can't institutionalize wellness.
You had mentioned data. That's an enormous part of it. Again, going back to that, the 401k space and the participant space, when we look at the 5+ million or so participants that are out there, about 35% of them have significant student loan debt. Nearly 60 actually don't have about 3 months of emergency savings built up. Trying to figure out who's who is a really important piece. Going on to financial literacy, certainly for somebody that's engaged, we can just throw content after content to them and they can build up that acumen and they can drive it on their own, or they can find, hey, you know what, this is a little overwhelming, but I'm gonna get a financial advisor because I'm engaged, I'm excited. That's not most people, unfortunately. I wish it was. Everybody probably would be better off if it was. For those that aren't likely to want to consume the volumes of financial literacy content, the effective tool we're finding is really pointed, simple, singular messages. Essentially, what is your next best action? People often have they're gonna give it 10 minutes. If it takes any longer than that, they're gonna go watch Netflix. And so, do we have them create a budget for paying down their college debt? Or do we have them set aside $10 every week or month, if that's all they can afford, to build that emergency savings? It's finding those little bits of information that allow us to then get them started. We're seeing plan sponsors see the importance of incorporating those elements, like whether it's straight out of paycheck, straight into paying down the student loan, or straight out of paycheck, straight into emergency savings account. Those type of singular little steps, really important for that half, probably even more, that aren't really engaged. For the half that are engaged, it's a lot of fun. The conversations we can have are enormous, but it's a balancing act because you first got to do the data. Who is this person? And as soon as you start getting a little bit, then you can start going with those really targeted messages.
So I would say not even half are engaged. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It's not even half. It's a lot less than that. Where do we, do we just start younger? Do we start earlier as employees, as employers? What is our role and responsibility in this? When should it start?
Can I just add on to that too?
Yeah.
Sorry, but this is a very frustrating thing for me because I went to a financial planning college, right? So people I graduated with, all CFPs, everyone's left the industry because no one's doing anything to sustain it, right? So if we're going, I worked at the previous firm that I left, I was their succession plan, right? Because no one has one. But if you're not adjusting and changing, if you're not following what's going on with the younger people, I don't want to work for you, right? So we see everyone leaving. What is AssetNet doing to help sustain an industry that's kind of, quite frankly, dying? And if you're not gonna,
I like your question better than mine.
but and then I don't have
Fix it all
years,
too.
I don't
Fix
have
it all.
years to talk about technology with, right? I'm the person that's gonna bring the technology to the firms. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's why is there, I hate this disconnect.
Are you, just so I understand, are you saying you don't appreciate the disconnect between the age groups? And I really don't actually.
No,
okay,
no.
Just say your question again, because I'm going
I'll simplify it. I'm just saying, what is FinTech doing to help sustain this business model, right? The financial planning business model, and making sure that they have succession plans that include AssetNet, right? That include all these softwares.
Well, it seems to me, just from my limited experience, I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of other CEOs in our space because we're all trying to figure out what's going on and how can we help and grow each other, which has really been awesome, by the way. For those of you that are involved, at least in the advisor FinTech space, it's really tight. I would say we, because I feel like it's a community. And there's other events like we promote, like Advice Tech Live, where we get together, people say, let's build a community and investment, so that we all know what each other are doing and we all lift each other. That's really unique, actually, in the FinServ area that I have seen. And so I think there is a general awareness that the financial advisor community, whatever we're going to be called in 5-10 years, is so critical to taking action for most people, right? So no different than gyms, right? Gyms exist, a lot of people can join, but the most healthy people are really going to pay for help and support, right? Guidance. And I think there's always going to be a place for that. The technology, there's no question, is going to be a part of these advisor roles, but I think what you are going to see is most of us in FinTech are very mindful that the human advisor plays such a critical role. They don't want to actually eliminate the human advisor. They want to elevate the opportunity for the advisor to spend more time with the client, have better conversations, go holistic, deliver more value, especially as you see fee compression, not justifying, I'm just sending you statements and getting your assets for 1%. So I think that there's a huge support for the human advisor, and challenges you bring up, such as succession planning, are real challenges. And I think that's really your generation's challenge to fix and figure out and innovate on, because you have a lot of opportunities, I think, to build practices.
I don't want that role.
Yeah, show them.
I know, thank you.
Well, I'll level set a little bit, and if there's any advisors in the room that don't have a succession plan, I can give you my phone number afterwards.
Business development.
But secondly, from an industry perspective, I think some of the activity that the panel before, SCI, Vanguard, American Express, they've incentivized young folks to create FinTech startups by funding them. And the top talent, I think, goes that direction instead of, maybe 30 years ago, top talent was going into the wealth advisory space because margins were great. You could earn 8% commissions on these products, right? That's where the money was. So there could be a reversion, in this current economic environment. Maybe, top talent comes back into this industry, and I think young people may come back if they're employers and if there are people willing to, change and make an environment that's better for them. Now, from the wellness component, maybe going back to Sean's question, I think starting earlier from, a wellness and literary perspective in schools and just with young folks, even in, families with young children, having a way to engage those young kids and students is really important. It's really hard to do. I know states are making financial literacy part of the curriculum. It seems very imperfect. I saw the curriculum for New Jersey, and I'll leave it at that. But I think there's a responsibility for folks like SCI and Vanguard and even Zenith to create solutions that help younger folks become more confident in their financial picture and their future and the ability to have financial wellness in their life.
The thing that I'm hearing a lot in conversations like this is, we need to have personalized experience. It needs to be easy enough for people to get started. It needs to be accessible. How do we do this at scale? That's hard. I'm interested how you all thinking about that.
Can I just, you're picking a bone, because I feel like, to my point about talent in the industry, it's almost like young founders have been incentivized to create a scalable business where you don't need a lot of people and you can scale this product or this service or whatever to the moon. And, I feel like businesses, even unscalable businesses like financial planning, for example, can be scalable if you have a good culture and you know how to hire people and create a good team. You can get really big. So I don't know, I just want to maybe debunk the myth of scalability and reaching all these folks. You can do it with a big team and a lot of people. And I think it's about firms creating great cultures where they can have a lot of humans on their staff to deliver the services and the planning and the literacy and the education component that needs to be delivered to our population.
A big part too is that FinTech solution, obviously. You can have a big financial advisory practice, particularly if you've got a great underlying platform. It allows the advisors to really focus on the relationship component, the piece that effectively we all as people are going to be much better at than any machine would be. There's reasons that better months and wealth fronts struggle to acquire and retain meaningful long-term relationships. There wasn't a person to form a relationship with. And when you have significant wealth, whether that number is, that's all relative, but significant wealth to that individual, if there's not a relationship to guide somebody through it, it's pretty hard for them to have a sticky business model there. What's really effective about those tools is that they can remove a whole lot of things that essentially nobody's gonna even know whether you did it or a machine did it. They're gonna know if you called them, because they're certainly not gonna listen to a robot talk to them on the phone. Certainly not in person either. And so that's where I think a lot of the scalability comes in, is leveraging the FinTech components there. Again, of course, like you end up with, you can only have so many conversations in a day, so it scales, but it scales linearly. Maybe we don't need as many financial advisors as we've had. If somebody previously could have had a book of 30 clients, can they have 50 now, or 100, because they've got much more of the day-to-day operations handled behind the scenes? So in some ways, you might see a compression in the number of advisors, but then as people roll, new advisors can handle a bigger book. That's a possibility. I think it's a reality we're even seeing in a lot of spaces. That's that important component of that human and technology merger.
So if you want to solve a big problem, like getting people more financially well and scale that out, you have to take the leaders that are talking about finance and not make it literally siloed. Most of us in the room, if you've been in finance any length of time, have focused on the AUM model, right? It's a wallet share, asset gathering, whether it's bank or investment or maybe even insurance. It's all about acquiring capital to put to work and monetize it, right? That's it. Investments is not financial wellness. It's a piece of it. And as long as we keep talking about the stock market and crypto and building wealth, and don't talk about, have you protected your family? Have you structured your legal situation? Are you saving for education? Are you budgeting? Are you making good financial decisions we're never going to talk about wellness. We're just going to talk about capital, because that's where the business is. That's where we all make money and our organizations make the most money. So the challenge is that we have to move towards a holistic, I know it sounds like touchy-feely, but we have to move to this whole person type of perspective, or we will wind up not just perpetuating the same old thing, right? That it's all about, hey, just go to Robinhood. You can just do that. You don't need advisors, go to Robinhood, right? That's wellness? No, that's like saying, I want to get healthier. They're like, just eat this Kind bar. Like, okay, am I healthy now? No, you're full, but just for 30 minutes. So, we have any of those, by the way? I'm actually now thinking that. Anyway, you can tell my ADD comes into play just in the right times. The point is that I think we need to solve the conversation problem. And that's why I'm really pleased to see how many holistic advisors are coming in and talking about legal, tax, insurance, investment, and budgeting, and creating opportunity. I wonder whether actually an advisor who currently serves 100 clients can actually really serve 100 clients. Yes, I can manage their money because I'm managing all the same way for everybody, and they've all got the same baking, and I'm just collecting great money and I go golf, okay? I think that model is going to fall apart. Unfortunately, I built my business on that. I just don't think it's the future. The way you scale out wellness is that you have to use technology to automate it. And the last thing I'll say about it is you have to let the advisors know what the state of health is of their clients in the first place. Because right now, all they know is whether they're up or down in the market. They're not asking the question of, gosh, could they handle a loss of life scenario? Like, I want to know, I want a red light on my screen for every single client right now that can't handle certain basic situations in their life that has nothing to do with investments, so I can pick up the phone and call them. And I realized that wasn't the last thing, because I want to scare you. There's over 1 million people right now in Asset Map. Nobody knows this. There's 1.1 million people that have been financially mapped in Asset Map. It's $1.4 trillion of where your stuff is. That data we do not sell, but I'm going to tell you some insight. 70% of those people are drastically underinsured if they died tomorrow. Like, they couldn't replace 30% of their remaining earnings for the rest of their life. I want to know every one of those people, and I want to pick up the phone and say, by the way, do you know you're driving around without your seatbelts? That's what an advisor should be doing. Not necessarily responding to whether you think now's a good time to buy the S&P. Because that's real. 70%, these are people working with advisors, and they're that drastically underinsured. That's the opportunity for embedded finance, solve the problem directly, next best action. That advisors need to know.
So how are you communicating this to them? I mean, you have to be in Asset Map in some way.
Well, now we are, but it's just we literally had to build it in the last 6 months because it was just such an obvious problem, and we found that most of our advisors were investment advisors
Yeah.
who don't know how to talk about long-term care. They don't know how to talk about property and casualty liability. They never been trained for that. They don't sell it. They don't make money. They ain't gonna do it. Okay, so this is a sales-based culture that's migrated into an advisory culture. Great, awesome alignment on best interest, but still paid the same way. You're gonna always have this problem. It's training, it's education.
So there's two audiences, advisors and clients, and both of them have real needs that we can and should be helping solve with technology, data, insights. I agree. And by the way, investors, no matter how old or young, no matter how little or much money they have, they expect pretty much everything at this point. They've been trained to expect everything. There was a Spectrum Group study on this. They don't just expect financial performance and investment management or a financial plan, they expect estate planning, they expect education planning, insurance advice, tax advice from their advisor. The expectation of advisors and their teams is like, frankly, unrealistic. And I think when I think about scalability, you do have to use technology or partnership or whatever the things are that you use. Good point.
Yeah, to the point about collaboration and partnership, I mean, I think that there's a relatability factor of advice and, we have a couple of financial planners on our team and their clients are all different. There's components of estate or insurance or tax or investment planning that they all need. Some of them, it's more important than others. So you have to meet them where they are. And, collaborating with other people in the industry that may have a specialty in tax planning or estate planning is something that we frankly need to do a better job doing. And I think a lot of firms, could go down that same route, right? Firms that have been trained to do investment management, but they have all these insurance and tax liabilities on their books with their clients, should be working with other firms that carry that specialty. And I think to the point about client data and collaboration that we were talking about earlier, it's difficult, but I think it seems like a pretty big need because people do expect, we see some of our clients come in and they want everything. And it's like, well, we can do these 3 out of the 12 things you mentioned, well, but maybe we should introduce somebody else into the room or a tool into the room.
And we are gonna take questions too.
I feel like I'm just gonna spar with that. So I have a question about scalability though, because a perfect example is Facet Wealth. Yeah. And every single advisor that's went to work there has left. Lawsuits out the rear end, right?
I don't know.
And so, there is. So, and they like to say they're the perfect example of scalability. But at the end of the day, your advisors aren't treated right, your clients aren't treated right. Sure, you have good software and you grew really fast, but now advisors are unhappy, clients are unhappy, and all you have is the software.
Yeah.
So how do you say we combat that version of scalability?
But I think, isn't that the same problem for every company though, right? That grew super fast and raised, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, for that example you just gave with Facet,
right.
I mean, they're spending, someone told me recently, spending something like $16 million in just getting business in the door because they have to meet the requirements. I think any company that's kind of moving that fast is gonna have issues, but I'm not exactly sure what the question is to, I don't know, what I'm supposed to.
Like incorporating the technology, because they were so, Facet drove with their technology, right? Like that was their value add. We have this great technology, we're gonna allow you to take on 100 clients, right? My goal before I left previous firm was 100 clients, and they're saying you can take on 200 clients, right? So
Okay.
it's, as an advisor, how are we supposed to understand if we're still delivering good service for your product and scale it at the same time? It's a,
Oh, I get it. Okay, so but the answer is a human question. A business like this, human-based financial advice, the number one indication of whether it's stable is whether you're getting referrals, right? It's whether you have inbound organic growth, just like the tech companies would think, in a service-style business where other people want to refer that. If they're not referring that, that should be your biggest concern. If you're a financial advisor looking for culture and you want to join an organization, go to an organization that can prove that that people want to work with you because the experience is there. I think most people don't know what to expect when they
doesn't
work
it
with a
make you
financial
sad
advisor.
though? Because there's people out
No, it's an
there
opportunity.
that are getting like terrible service.
No, but 90% of the financial services customers are getting no service. They're getting no service. If you look at most of the larger companies that distribute even products, they have what we call orphans, basically tens of thousands in every single city. I talk to companies, and I'm not gonna name them. They're like, we have tens of thousands of individual customers who have contract holders with us or accounts with us. Nobody's talked to them in 10 years. but we're happy to get the residual trail value of that, even though perhaps Department of Labor might be pushing them to say, listen, you gotta add some value, you're gonna get this comp. It's supporting the business. There's one major broker dealer that they told me 25% of their revenue is orphan business, not even been serviced. They're just collecting pennies and pennies. Am I upset about that? It's an opportunity to serve and help people, and I think there's a demand. We can all find ways to help meet it.
Back to the earlier panel, I take the point that it'd be great to get to that consumer who has no help. It's an educational issue, maybe it's in school. And then there's the uber wealthy, certified rich guy, multi-family office, which is well served. This is not served. In the middle, and the point from the prior panel is, what about employers? And do you see an opportunity through an employee benefit program? I mean, I've been involved in a number of companies, and the one thing that I try so hard is 401k plans, but then you have to actually nudge people, even with a match. You know, it was 100% match, 50% match. So, but that's just an example. The question is, can you take your skill set and your perspective, and do you see the employer as a vehicle to, you know, enhance financial wellness more broadly?
I can jump in. I mean, the short answer is absolutely. When 401k started becoming more and more prominent, late 80s, early 90s, the initial take was, oh, people are going to be so excited about this. They're going to be able to just jump in. They're going to know what investments to pick. The stock market's going up. They're going to love it.
You're going to reduce my monthly paycheck by a match. Oh,
Yeah.
good.
People didn't know what to do with these things. Not at all. Adoption was crazy low. Savings rates were really low. Far too low, particularly if it was meant to supplement or replace a defined benefit plan. It was teetering on a crisis until you started having legislation like the Pension Protection Act that would have gone in 2006, allowing things like auto savings, auto escalation, defaults into investment products that were probably a lot more suitable than they might have picked on their own. It's really helping build, hopefully, a capital base only for about half the population that's actually enrolled in a 401k plan, but at least it's half, it's better than none. There's a lot of other opportunities, though, to your point. Like, it's not just about saving for retirement. That's really the only place where we've got inertia working for us. Everywhere else still takes active engagement. I'm finding whether it's FinTech solutions, part of the onboarding process when somebody joins an employer of, oh, check this box or don't check this box, and then we're going to start doing something. Those pieces can go a really long way. Sometimes you need legislation in there, because sometimes these things aren't technically legal, even if they are in somebody's best interest, unless you've got protection to do it. But I do think there's a huge opportunity. Use technology combined with that inertia effect. And people will essentially love to do nothing. And so if you can prove you're doing it in their best interest and it's going to improve their lives and capture inertia, that's where I think we can make a huge amount of difference. We've seen it in retirement, we need to do it other places.
I just had a question right on that topic. So, I would make the case that the scalable nature of digital technology is what's changed in the 401k industry, and that companies like Vanguard and SageView and Personal Capital are now looking at the plan participant business as a source for wealth management. But to get back to financial wellness, leveraging scale technology to finally look at the gazillions of plan participants that are here at Vanguard and are at the larger, as wealth management, opportunities, doesn't really change the fact that nobody wants to talk to people who don't have money. Nobody cares about them. There's, financial wellness is great, and we'll do a 20-minute session on debt management, and please don't call me ever again. But I guess the question is, what is the financial model for those people? Is it flat fee planning through XY, or is it, is it a direct consumer solution, through you? I don't know. To me, it's very.
Doesn't that mean a fundamental change in the compensation model for the advisors?
Yes.
That's
not happening.
I know it's not happening.
I've seen, there are trends in that. I mean, hourly is a thing, there are trends. I just talked to an advisor earlier this week who had one solo advisor served 475 people. I don't know how you do that well. You don't.
Yeah, but I mean,
So we
again, why'd you rob the bank? That's where the money goes, right?
Well, like, I think the models are changing, like, for example, have an organizational client, we manage their investment portfolio, their endowment. They want to deliver financial literacy and planning services to their staff and their program participants, these students. They have a charitable donation that's funding that work that will pay us, right? So in that sense, we're not getting compensated from assets, right? And I think to the point about employee benefit, I question if, like, employees want that benefit from their employer, but we've had some success with, like, employee resource groups who, like, whether it's like all the black, employees at Facebook, got on a webinar with one of our planners and they talked about different issues and otherwise. If they can pay the planning fee, they could be a great client. They don't have to have any money, right? Eventually, we'd like them to accumulate some investment dollars because we want to charge asset-based fees for sure. But I think we definitely have to rethink how we, charge clients or charge the people that are, above our clients, the school, the employer, the organization, whatever it is.
We have time for one more question.
To that point, trained people deliver good advice, good literacy. Fundamentally, the way people get information has changed. TikTok, meme stocks, said Robinhood. We've seen millions of people who have become options day traders because of these trends. We're talking about wellness, we're talking about this. It might be that person who's living paycheck to paycheck who's decided to basically dump all their money into an option because the influencer on TikTok said it was a no-brainer. How does that change really the wellness paradigm when you're thinking about how we're going forward versus how people are actually consuming information? I forget who said it, but basically meeting them where they are with the information to be able to deliver that.
We've got to get on TikTok.
25% of millennials do look at social media for investment advice.
Yeah, so I mean, it's amazing actually how effective social has been for us. Most of our, just to give it a context, 2 years ago before pre-COVID, we were getting, most of our advisors were buying our tour, finding out about Asset Map through trade shows and events, and I would speak and do all this other stuff. When that dried up, we went to Facebook, and right now there's 400 to 500 demos a month just from Facebook of my product, just from Facebook. Why? Because it's literally serving them. So it's definitely true. I've been converted. Now I understand that social media is the way that we're going to get the next generation. You have to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity. You mentioned young people. I have 2 early 30-year-olds. And I pulled the rest of my hair out trying to get them into normal institutions on the premise that you have time in your hands. But they don't listen to their father until a couple years ago. Couldn't get them to invest, couldn't get them to buy real estate. Their generation you get married later, 3 years later, they have children later. Finally, they're coming around and they're jumping in. They have solid 6-figure careers. They focused on that. They moved all over the place, did whatever they could, and now they're settling. So all their investments are later. There's this whole shift. Now, people are pushing you to have 200 clients and 400 clients. You might have to pick up the 30 to 80K savers and anticipate they're going to be the $500,000 to $2 million people in their 40s. I think there's a tremendous market there because they're like, Dad, I don't trust your institutions. Your generation caused recessions and this and that, and why would I buy a house if it's going to drop in value and then I'll be underwater?
We have a name for that clientele, and they're called Henrys, so high earners, not rich yet. And I actually started in social media about focusing on those people in particular, right? Because you have 6-figure careers, you have all your money in your 401ks and your IRAs, you have no money for me to manage, but it'll be there, right? So I have to invest in you. I have to understand that transient lifestyle is now a thing. People don't want to buy houses. I understand that, right? So it's now translating that into the new way of planning, right? The new way of technology. You have to adapt to the planning styles of these individuals.
Yeah. So I think FinTech, like Asset Map, or maybe you can adapt it for something like this. I think FinTech gives you the leverage to handle that wider breadth of work that needs to get done. For that generation, they're going to be left high and dry. They finally bought life insurance.
None of them have wills. None of them.
No, they don't have wills, they don't even have financial planners.
They have school debt.
I'm the financial planner that they don't listen to.
Yeah.
I'm good time.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna
Sorry.
say, I'm gonna cut it, I see we're being, summoned here, so thank you all for your insight.